good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to give this a shot. Okay. So welcome. Glad to see so many people here. Had I known food safety was going to be such a hot topic, I would have done it sooner. But this is the first time we're offering this type of a presentation. So certainly if anybody has like an RSO or something like that that they might want it for, or something along those lines, or if you know of a professor who might want it for a class, let us know. My name is Barbara. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the dietitians here at Health Promotion and Wellness. And here we have two dietitians, and so we see students for one-on-one nutrition counseling. We do the cooking demos that are offered in this room, and you can always find those on OwlLife, just like you did this. And then we do tabling and different presentations. HPW has a health fair every semester, so there's all kinds of different things. If you guys haven't checked out our lobby, there's massage chairs and all kinds of games and coloring and all kinds of activities to do because it is the new relaxation station, and so you get to come in there and chill out. So you can set up an appointment and do a massage chair, and you get like 20 minutes, and they're really nice. So give that a shot. All right, so we are going to do talk about food safety today. You see where I'm at, which I can't see. All right, so food poisoning is super common. Has anybody ever experienced it before? It's not a lot of fun, right? And so it can range from mild to severe, and it can even lead to hospitalization. So that's definitely something that we want to avoid. It's not something you want for yourself. It's not something you want for your family if you are cooking for them. And then it is certainly not something you want for your friends if you're like, oh, come on over, I'll cook for you. And that's not the reputation you want to have in school. So we're going to talk today about how to avoid all of that and to be able to cook a little bit safer. Because this can be expensive if you've got those medical bills. You could miss class, you could miss work, all of those things, all the reasons we don't want to get sick. In addition to that, we're also going to talk about food allergies, because that's part of being safe in the kitchen. Food allergies affect about 12% of the population right now, the people that know they have food allergies. Some people haven't figured it out yet. You can also develop food allergies as you get older. I myself found out I was allergic to strawberries about 2 years ago, so I am like 4 times your age, so it can happen at any point in time, okay? And so we want to make sure that we're very careful about what we're serving or offering other people, because you wouldn't want that to happen to a friend or a classmate or a family member, because those can be very severe as well. So for the first step of what we're going to talk about is like, how do I know the food is safe even from day one, right? And so there's a couple of websites that you can check out if you're worried about a food recall. And this isn't something you have to look at all the time, but if a teacher or a classmate happens to mention something, you hear something on the news, this is where you can go to find out more details about that recall. So there's both the USDA.gov site and the FDA.gov website. And sometimes you'll even see this stuff on social media. The FDA handles food safety for most foods. The USDA handles like meat and eggs and things like that. So it's worth checking either site. Can anybody think of a recent food recall that was really huge? Oh yeah, there was one I heard about, like noodles and stuff, right here in that one.
There was a recall on Boar's Head.
Boar's Head was the really big one lately, okay? And so they've actually closed one of their plants because of the problems that they're having. They've said they will never, they're not going to carry liverwurst anymore because making that product caused some kind of contamination. They didn't specify what, but something was going on. I imagine most people are not going to be really sad either they don't carry liverwurst anymore, because that's not usually a big seller, I'm betting. But the plant's closed indefinitely. So this can be huge money cost for companies and stuff. So they certainly don't want this to happen, but there are safety protocols set up so that when it does, you can be notified as a consumer. You can find out on these websites where to go, like, do I return the food to the store? Do I, email the company to get a refund? Like, what is that gonna look like? And so you can, if you were to happen to buy something that turns out to be recalled, you can get your money back for it. So we're going to kind of do this like in chronological order that you would imagine it's going to happen. So once we've checked out, we made sure that the food that we want to go get is doesn't have any recalls or anything. Now we got to go to the store, right? And so how are we going to be safe with our food when it comes to shopping? And so you want to check dates. A lot of items in the grocery store have dates on them. And you want to be able to check that and see if they, are they really close dated? You wouldn't want to grab milk that goes on a date tomorrow. Yes, it's probably okay for another day or two, but chances are you're not going to go through it that fast. So you want to grab something with a later date. The same can be said of bread and donuts and cereals and all kinds of things like that. So it's always worth it, especially if it's something that's going to go on a date or something that you would maybe not use right away, or something that is very perishable, that you might want to go ahead and keep an eye on the dates on it. Eggs comes to mind, okay? And so you want to watch for that. Now, some foods don't have a date on them, or the date they do is coded. It's not written as an actual date. You don't have to worry about those, and all of these are checked by the store, but people are human, they can miss stuff. If it's a coded date, then the company keeps track of all of that, and it's probably something that is way in the future, like a year or two down the road, and you don't have to worry about that. So if there is a date, pay attention to it, but if there's not, don't worry about it. It doesn't mean that it's a problem. And you also want to check the packaging. Make sure that the packaging isn't damaged or in any way. If you can see the PowerPoint, like there's some damaged cans and things like that. And so it kind of depends on what the damage is in the packaging, whether or not you're going to be safe with it. If it's just a can that kind of has a little bit of a curve to it, a little bit of a dent to it, you might be fine. You need to look and see if there's any sharp edges. Does it look like air has gotten in there? Because that's what's going to cause a problem. You need to look and make sure that it's not rusted, nothing like that. Every now and again, you come across a store that will actually give you a discount on damaged items. So that might be a way that you could afford more food, but you just need to make sure you're being safe when it comes to that. So make sure that it seems like the integrity of the food hasn't been breached, okay? So you want to make sure that the packaging is good. If it's something that comes in like a bag, then, is the bag sealed? Are you losing any product out of it? That kind of stuff, because you want to make sure that you're getting everything you're paying for. And you want to make sure nothing has gotten in there like ants or other bugs. And so all of those things are important. You also want it to be as fresh as possible. And if the packaging has tears or a hole in it, then maybe it's not as fresh as it could be. And so the other thing that you can find on the labels or on the packaging is they will highlight allergens. And so like I said before, we're just going to highlight allergies a little bit because that is part of being safe in the kitchen. And so you can notice that right underneath any list of ingredients in bold, the company is required to list any foods that are considered one of the major allergens. And so it will tell you right in that package. And you might even see sometimes a recall where there's nothing wrong with the food, but they neglected to mention that there's certain products in there that are allergens. And so then they're required to pay for a recall for that as well, so that somebody who's allergic to that item doesn't pick it up thinking that they're safe and yet they're not. And so here we've got like the major allergens that you can find, the 9 major allergens that companies are required to identify. All right, so we have milk, egg, fish, shellfish, sesame, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soy. And so all of those will be on the label. And so if you have friends or family members, or if you yourself are allergic to any of these, it's important to know that and to really pay attention to what's being served. The commons is required to label things that might have these allergens in them. A lot of restaurants and dining halls try to avoid these whenever we can. For example, like when we do cooking demos here, we always have this sign up to warn people that there could be allergens in the food. We certainly, sometimes we'll cook with milk, sometimes eggs, but for example, we won't bring peanuts into a cooking demo. We're just not going to do that. There's too many people who are severely allergic to peanuts. It's not worth the risk. So reactions can range from a rash or just their stomach being upset all the way to having to be hospitalized. And so we do want to be really careful when you're cooking for someone else, or if you yourself have allergies and you're, say, buying food at a bake sale on campus, or if you've brought something in and you're offering to share it with a classmate or a friend, make sure they don't have any allergies, or make sure you know what's in it. Otherwise, as polite as it might be to offer, you want to be careful that you're not offering them something that can make them quite sick. And then sometimes, especially with peanuts, inhaling some of the dust is all it takes for somebody to have a reaction. So they don't even have to eat it in order to end up with some real problems. So we want to make sure we're being really careful about that. And if you do have any friends who have strong allergic reactions, make sure you know where they keep their EpiPen. They probably carry one. And that is a dose of medication, of epinephrine, that will help them if they start having a reaction, and it can save their life. And so if anybody has severe food allergies, it's very common for them to carry one of these. But if they're suddenly going into anaphylactic shock, they may not be able to get to it. So if you have a friend with that, make sure you know where it is. So if you're with them, you could grab their EpiPen for them and either put it in their hand or, if necessary, inject it for them. If you're together a lot, that may be something you want to know how to do in order to help them out. So this happens on college campuses, and it can be really scary. And so the more you know about it, the more prepared you are, the less likely that anybody will panic or that there will be a problem. Okay, so moving past allergies. Now we've bought our food, we know that it's safe from when we got it, but what do we do next? Well, we're gonna have to clean. And so we wanna make sure that the food stays safe, and that we're not introducing it to anything that could be in our own homes that we don't wanna expose the food to. So for example, like produce. We wash produce generally before we use it, but you do have to be careful. Some produce, like berries, shouldn't be washed when you first get them home. They're going to start to break down because of that water. They're going to get mushy, and their quality is not going to be very good. And unless you're putting them in a smoothie, you're probably not going to want to eat them anymore. And so if you just put them straight into the refrigerator and say you're planning on eating them tomorrow, then they'll be fine in the refrigerator, and you can wash them right before you eat them, and now the quality won't break down. But they absorb that extra water, and then they're just not going to be a very good consistency like we expect. So we also have to wash our hands before preparing food. Anybody that's ever been to one of our cooking demos, we make everybody line up, wash their hands. We also use gloves. And so even when you're cooking at home, it's important to wash your hands before you're handling any of the food. We don't even realize all the places that our hands touch and all the bacteria that it could come in contact with. So why not just go ahead and do that? We also wear aprons here when we're doing cooking demos. And aprons aren't just for protecting your clothes from the food that you're preparing. It's also protecting your food from whatever might be on your clothes. Because if you think about it, your shirt and your pants came with you to every single classroom you went to today, to the dining hall, to wherever else, to this room, everywhere you've been. Maybe you got home and your dog ran up to you and you were petting your dog and all that's on your clothes. And you might not think twice about it, but if we cover it up, now we have a better chance of keeping those types of things out of our food. And again, we're just a little bit safer. And so don't forget that every time you touch your face, touch your hair, touch your phone, you're opening yourself up to more kind of germs, more kinds of bacteria, and that kind of thing. So we have to remind people when we're doing cooking demos, even when they have gloves on, those gloves are not some kind of magic barrier. If you pull your phone out with gloves on, now whatever was on your phone is on your gloves, and whatever was on your gloves could be on your phone. And so we want to make sure that we always keep that separate. So if that does happen, I definitely have people change out their gloves, get a fresh pair. Let's put the phone over away so that we don't mess with it. But remember that when you're at home too. Again, how often do we clean our phones? Probably not very often, right? So we want to make sure that we're careful with that. So you also, especially if you're handling anything raw, again, that has an opportunity to get things, and the next time you touch your phone, you could be touching just like you were touching that raw food. Also remember your work surface. We tend to think about it as, well, there's no visible dirt, so it must be fine. But I want you to think about your backpack. Think of all the surfaces your backpack touches throughout the day. Maybe it was on the floor of the bus, or on a seat where somebody sat, or you set it on a seat or a table when you were at the Commons. You set it on the floor of every classroom you went to. It's probably on the floor right now. And then you get home and you throw that on the counter, and then you move it and you go to prepare food. It's touched a lot of spots, and it's kind of like the bottom of your shoes being on that counter. So it wouldn't hurt to wipe down those counters before you get started, in addition to washing your hands and making sure that everything around you is clean as well. All your utensils should be cleaned, your cookware should be cleaned. It's not enough just to rinse it out. Even if you have, say, a clean pot that's been sitting on the stove, make sure the outside hasn't gotten splattered with something else that you were cooking nearby. Because that's going to burn onto your pot. It could cause smoking. You don't want to be the person in the dorm that set off the smoke alarms. That's not the reputation you want. So making sure that you're washing those. When you do, keep an eye out for damage. There could be chips and plates and chips and different things. And you don't want those sharp, jagged edges. And you don't want a seam or a crack where bacteria could grow, and then you're reusing that utensil or that pot, and now that's getting into your food. So just be careful about that. So now we're ready to cut up some produce. We're ready to do some different things. We're going to wash our produce because we're ready to chop it up. What we have is a couple of different options. Now you can just rinse your produce under running water and that should be fine. There are some stores that will sell like a produce wash. It comes in a spray bottle. And that could be an option if you're not really comfortable with just rinsing it off. You could always spray it down with that and then just rinse that off. That's fine. I actually had a professor at Georgia State who would wash her vegetables in dish soap. As long as you rinse it properly, I guess that's fine. But I looked at her, I was like, you do what? She goes, I don't know what's on there. I'm like, okay, you're really intelligent and you know a lot about nutrition, but no, I'm not doing that. And I still know her and she's fantastic. She's well known in the areas of nutrition, but yeah, she uses Dawn and water to clean her vegetables. It's up to her. So you don't have to go that far. You can just rinse them off. If you get off the visible dirt and all that, chances are you're probably cooking most of your vegetables that you're chopping up, and the cooking process is going to take care of a lot of what might be on there. So I had somebody ask me a few weeks ago, because they'd seen online that you should wash chicken before you use it, and I was like, no, you don't have to do that. And she's like, all right, because I just don't understand why people would do that. And so you'll see sometimes stuff like that on social media where they'll give you this recommendation and it sounds a little weird and it's probably fine. Now, can you rinse it underwater? Sure. If you're a little concerned or if you see something that you don't quite know what that is and you want to rinse it, that's fine. Rinse it underwater. But no, you don't have to scrub it. You don't have to do anything else. The one thing that kind of concerns me with that, though, is cross-contamination. Because now you're rinsing off whatever's on that meat, say bacteria, E. coli, something like that, into your sink. So you are going to have to be careful to wash your sink and scrub your sink after that, just to make sure you're not cross-contaminating onto something else. So cross-contamination is always something that we want to be careful about, because it is the way that the bacteria from one food gets onto another one. This can be particularly dangerous if we have bacteria coming off like a raw meat that ends up on a prepared food, like say raw chicken coming in contact with like pico de gallo. You aren't going to cook that pico or the tomatoes that are in it or whatever, and so now that the germs from that raw chicken have gotten transferred into that food that isn't going to be cooked, so nothing's going to kill those germs. So you want to make sure that we're keeping prepared foods and raw foods separate in different parts of your kitchen or on different parts. You know, one thing on the island, one thing on the counters in the back while you're making it. So another way that cross-contamination can happen is with our cutting boards. And I pulled out a few here. You'll notice that here in the Learning Kitchen, we have different colored cutting boards. And the reason for that is because we use them for different products. So we use the green ones for what? Anybody remember? Fruits and vegetables, okay? Green ones are used for produce, all right? What do you think the yellow ones might be used for? Chicken, okay? And then the red ones, if the yellow's for chicken, what do you think the red ones might be for? Red meats, like beef, stuff like that, okay? You also might see white ones, which tend to be for dairy products. Purple ones are for allergen-free foods, so sometimes that is used. I think it's blue is for fish. So there's multiple different colors. So if you ever have a job working in a kitchen and they have different colored cutting boards, there's probably a reason, okay? And so paying attention to that is important. A lot of people at home don't have multiple colored cutting boards, right? You might have one, you might have two. And today we have some giveaway cutting boards as well, if you guys can each grab one as you're leaving. It'll give you an extra cutting board to have at home. One of the reasons we like having multiple cutting boards is because if you are cutting up, say, raw chicken and green peppers, you can keep them separate, use them on separate cutting boards. You should also probably use separate knives, and that way whatever's on the raw chicken is not getting on your green peppers. So that is one of the things, but there are a lot of different cutting boards out there. Does anybody have plastic ones like this? A few people, okay. Does anybody have glass ones? Good. Oh, do you? Okay, glass ones can ruin your knives, just so you know. Because when you cut something, something has to give, and that glass isn't going anywhere, so it's going to damage the metal on your knife. So they'll probably get dull faster, so just be aware of that. There's also wooden cutting boards. Does anybody have wooden ones? A lot of people have wooden ones, okay. So there's nothing wrong with wooden ones, as long as you don't immerse them in water, you don't put them in the dishwasher, that kind of stuff. They need to be hand washed. They need to be washed kind of quickly. You don't want to leave liquids on them because that damages them. They can start to pull apart a little bit. But they're great for your knives, and they're great to use in a variety of situations. They can stain, so it is important to know that. But if they get roughed up, kind of like these, not this one so much, but like especially the green ones here get roughed up quite a bit because we use them a lot. On a wooden one, you can actually sand that down and re-oil it, and then it's good as new. So they do last much, much longer than, say, the plastic ones, which should probably be changed out every couple of years. So you want to be careful about that. And technically, the wood ones are supposed to be oiled like once a month. Most people don't do that, but just so you know, that's a thing. One of the issues with wooden boards, though, is they do absorb whatever the food is. So if it has any kind of moisture in it, it's going to absorb into that wooden board usually. And so this can be a little bit nerve-wracking when we're talking about cutting up raw meats and things like that. But not a lot of people have all this extra money to go buy extra cutting boards and have multiple, or maybe not even the room to store them, right? So this is another option that you can do. This is a cutting mat that you can place on top of your wooden cutting board. And you can use this for, like, say, the raw meat, so it doesn't soak into the wood. But these are really cheap. I think this was like a whole set of like 4 or 5 that I bought for like $10. And I've had these for a few years, and you can tell that, they might have, you can't see it, there might be a couple of scratches on them, but they've actually held up pretty darn well. And so that way you don't have to buy another whole cutting board, but you've got a few of these. And these can go anywhere. These can go through the dishwasher and that kind of stuff because, they're pretty inexpensive. You can replace them pretty easily. Also, parents love to have stuff like that on your Christmas list, so don't be afraid to add that stuff in because they see like, oh, well, they're being responsible, and then they want to throw that on your Christmas list, and you don't have to spend your money on it. Let them spend their money. And so that's another option if you're using just a wooden cutting board. Plastic ones are, like I said, the most convenient. They can go in the dishwasher. Nothing soaks into them. They don't ruin your knives. They're fairly inexpensive. I mean, we buy the really big ones for obvious reasons. We do a lot of cooking demos. But even like these ones that we're giving away today, those are plastic. It's nice to have some different sizes. Sometimes you're just cutting up an apple. You don't need a whole big board to wash. So maybe something smaller is better. But then if you're prepping veggies for meal prepping or something like that, you might want a bigger board. So think about that and having that available. Sorry, let me get through my notes down to. One of my notes that's on this slide. There is no 5-second rule. Okay, is everybody familiar with the 5-second rule? You guys have heard it? Everything? Yeah, okay, it's been around forever, right? Not when you want to be safe, not when you want to be careful, okay? It takes a lot less than 5 seconds for bacteria to jump off of a surface and get onto the whatever you just dropped on there. So maybe just go ahead and toss that out. Don't try to eat something that's fallen on the floor or, whatever. Like, just gonna have to be a little careful, maybe work a little slower, don't drop that stuff. But no, there is no 5-second rule. Okay, so now you've prepped your food and now you're getting ready to cook. Here we use oven thermometers to make sure that our ovens stay at the right temperature or are at the right temperature when we're using them. We don't just rely on the digital readout. We have actual thermometers in there. And we use also meat thermometers to make sure that the food is cooked to the proper internal temperature. And so the next question, of course, is what is the proper internal temperature? Well, we have a handout in front of you, or that we've attached, that has on the back, it has this chart that talks about having getting to a high enough temperature so that the food is cooked all the way through, and it depends on the food. So chicken has to be cooked up to 165 degrees. You don't want it less than that. There's no such thing as eating medium rare chicken. Not a good idea. Whereas steak or any kind of meat, that like whole meat, is like 145, so it's much lower. Ground meats have to be cooked to 160, 165 if it's ground chicken again. One of the problems you hear about with ground meat so often, then people are kind of curious as to why the rules are different. If you think about a steak, okay, the dangerous part, or where most of the bacteria could be on that steak, is on the outside, okay, all the edges. If you think about ground meat, they've taken a whole piece of meat and they've now cut it all up and mixed it all together. So the outside is everywhere and it's all been ground together. So it's as if the entire hamburger or whatever is the outside surface that could have come in contact with some bacteria. So that's why ground meats have to be cooked to a little higher temperature. There's even some states that don't allow you to order a burger lower than medium, I think. I think North Carolina used to be like that. I don't know if they still are, probably. And so it's because they're worried about the liability of somebody getting sick from undercooked ground beef that could potentially have some bacteria in it. So you've also got like fish and shellfish are 145 degrees. And so it's really in that range. We talk about a temperature danger zone, when we're talking about food safety, and that's the temperatures between 40 and 140 degrees. And so if you think about it, you always want things cooked above 140, and you always want your refrigerator to be under 40 degrees. And that keeps it out of that temperature danger zone, okay? And so we also use thermometers in our refrigerator and in our freezer to make sure that those are staying to the proper temperature. So if you're ever worried where you're like, boy, this food seems to be spoiling really quick, something like that, that's something you can get. They're fairly inexpensive. I want to say they're less than like $10. And you can put that in, and then, you know, if you're in the dorm, let the RA know, or if you're in an apartment, let maintenance know, hey, my refrigerator isn't working right. I've got a thermometer in there and it's, you know, it's temping at 45 degrees. That's not safe. So making sure that you know what it is that, whether or not you're able to keep your food safe. So in addition to making sure our equipment is holding the temperature that it's supposed to, we talked about making sure that the food gets to the temperature it's supposed to, but how do you know? Well, there's all kinds of meat thermometers out there. We tend to use these red ones a lot because they're really fast. And so that allows us to see if it's to the right temperature before anybody starts eating anything. And this is one that I use at home. This probe actually goes into the food in the oven, and then this sits on the counter. And so I can't remember how much I paid for this one, maybe $15. And you can actually set it for the temperature you want it to be, and then leave this on the counter, the probe's in the oven, you go on about your day, and then it will go off with an alarm when it hits that temperature for me. So if it's a piece of chicken and I've got it going to 165 degrees, I usually go up to like 170 just to be careful. And then it'll go off when it hits that temperature. Or it works as a timer as well, so if I know I'm going to cook it for an hour, then I can set it for an hour. But ones like this, like I said, they have a lot more usability, but they're not that much more expensive. And then you can see on the PowerPoint that there's a variety of different ones. Some of them, even on the dial, it'll say it's 145, this is good for beef and this type of food. And it will tell you what food is appropriate for that temperature. So those are really handy ones to have in addition to like the digital ones. And those with the dials, the metal ones, you just put it in the thickest part of the food when you put it in the oven and you leave it. And so it actually stays in the oven while the meat's cooking. Whereas ones like this, you pull the meat out and then you insert the thermometer to check the temperature. So all of those are just available at Walmart or Target or wherever you might be going. And they're really important to have to make sure that it gets cooked all the way and then you're not making yourself sick. So once we cook it, we want to make sure that it gets eaten fairly quickly. We don't want to leave it out on a counter for very long, right? It can cool a little bit, but then we want to eat it. And if we have any leftovers, well, those are going to have to go into the fridge or the freezer. And when you do that, if it's a large amount of food, like if you're meal prepping, it's a good idea to break it down into smaller containers because it's going to cool faster in those smaller containers. And like I said, we have that temperature danger zone. We want to get through that danger zone as fast as possible. The food's already at 145 degrees. We want to get it past 140, down past 40 as fast as we can. And so smaller containers is going to allow us to do that. If we had a big container, the center of that food isn't going to cool for quite some time. And so it's going to stay in that zone longer than we want it to. It's better to break it up. Also, when you have a large amount like that, it can actually bring the temperature of everything in your refrigerator up. And so you want to make sure you're cooling that as quick as possible. So that is important for leftovers. And remember that too, if you decide that you're going to bring those leftovers to campus the next day, you've got to be able to store those where they're going to be safe. So you want to use airtight containers to make sure air can't get in there. You know, when we do cooking demos, we have these little collapsible bowls we give out. But I warn people, those aren't airtight. Like they're great just for carrying, you know, snacks or whatever, but those lids don't stay on really, really well. So you don't want to carry soup in it, and you don't want it bouncing around your bag, or you're going to end up with trail mix all over the bottom of your book bag. But you want to make sure that you use a container that has a tighter lid. So whether it's Tupperware or Ziploc containers or whatever, making sure that the air can't get into it, because again, that's going to help the bacteria get in there if the air is getting in there. And even when you get food to go from a restaurant, a lot of those containers, it might be a styrofoam container or something like that, and those aren't airtight. All kinds of air can get in there. So it's important, if you're going to leave those in the fridge for any extended period of time, go ahead and transfer that to an airtight container, so that it stays fresher longer, and then also so it stays safe. And so when you bring, like I was saying before, when you bring your leftovers to campus for lunch, those need to stay at temperature then too. So you want to make sure that you have like an insulated lunch bag, or you have like a cold pack in there, something where you can keep it cold, unless you work on campus and maybe they have a fridge you can put your leftovers in until lunchtime or whatever. But making sure that those aren't getting to room temperature while you're going back and forth to class, because again, that can cause bacteria to grow, and then it can get bad enough to make you sick. And anything you have, if it's supposed to be heated up, you do want to heat it up completely. Again, that will make it safer, will bring everything down to a reasonable level, and then you can go ahead and eat it and know that it's not going to make you sick. All right. So let me see. So here we were talking about leftovers again. We see that a lot with meal prep. So just making sure that those are broken down into smaller batches. I often tell people that I'm working with, it's a good idea to start with like 2 recipes that you make the first time, and then take half of it, of each, and put them in the freezer. Because that way you have more than one option as you're going through the week. You won't get bored of the food. It's come Thursday or Friday, right? You're eating the same thing every day. And that way you have other options. And then if each week after that you just make one meal and put half of it in the freezer, now again you have a third option to kind of pick from. And so now you can rotate those through and make sure that you don't get bored of the food, and end up eating out anyway if that's your goal, to save a little money or eat at home more often. Getting bored of it isn't going to help that project. Okay, so are there questions? You guys have the handout that has all kinds of information on it, including this chart on the back. Any questions, concerns? Yes?
This is one question. Me and my family, we make a lot of rice, so sometimes we make like a 4-quart thing of rice and then we store it. But you said that's like better to like put it in different containers.
When it's hot and you're trying to cool it down quickly, yes, it's better to like try and cool it into smaller containers, especially depending on if there's any sauce with it or something like that. Or any container maybe that's more flat where it spreads out.
Yeah,
if you
like
think about it. So maybe a flat one might cool pretty quickly, but it's worth checking where maybe you go in like 30 minutes later and say, how hot is this still? And then another 30 minutes to kind of go. As long as it's cooling down, I would say within 2 hours, you're probably fine. But just, making sure that it's not sitting there hour after hour where it's like, oh, it's at about 60 degrees right now, and that's not really